In this video, we will talk about second language learning. Context for language learning. A second language learner is different from a very young child acquiring a first language. This is true in terms of both the learner's characteristics and the environment in which first and second language acquisition typically occur. Think about how the characteristics and learning conditions of the following learners may differ. 1. A young child learning a first language. 2. A child learning a second language in a daycare or on the playground. 3. Adolescents taking a foreign language class in their own country. And 4. An adult immigrant with limited or disrupted education working in second language environment and having no opportunity to go to language classes. By definition, all second language learners, regardless of age, have already acquired at least one language. This prior knowledge may be an advantage in the sense that they have an idea of how languages work. On the other hand, knowledge of other languages can lead learners to make incorrect guesses about how the second language works, and this may result in errors that first language learners would not make. Very young language learners begin the task of first language acquisition without the cognitive maturity or metalinguistic awareness that older second language learners have. Although young second language learners have begun to develop these characteristics, they will still have far to go in these areas, as well as in the area of world knowledge, before they reach the levels already attained by adults and adolescents. On the one hand, cognitive maturity and metalinguistic awareness allow older learners to solve problems and engage in discussions about language. On the other hand, some researchers have suggested that the use of these cognitive skills, so valuable for many kinds of tasks, can actually interfere with language acquisition. Their hypothesis is that successful language acquisition draws on different mental abilities that are specific to language learning. This view is related to the idea that there is a critical period for language acquisition. It has been suggested that older learners draw on their problem-solving and metalinguistic abilities precisely because they can no longer access the innate language acquisition ability they had as young children. In addition to possible cognitive differences, there are also attitudinal and cultural differences between children and adults. Most child learners are willing to try to use the language even when their proficiency is quite limited. Many adults and adolescents find it stressful when they are unable to express themselves clearly and correctly. Nevertheless, even very young, preschool children differ in their willingness to speak a language they do not know well. Some children happily chatter away in their new language. Others prefer to listen and participate silently in social interaction with their peers. Theories of second language acquisition. What exactly is second language acquisition? Broadly speaking, a second language, or L2, refers to any language learned after one's first language, or L1, no matter how many others have been learned. However, some linguists also make a distinction between second language learning and foreign language learning. Second language learning refers to the process of acquiring a non-native language that is spoken by the community where the learner is living. For example, when a native speaker of Japanese comes to the US to learn English, while foreign language learning refers to the process of acquiring a non-native language that is not spoken by the surrounding community. For example, when a native speaker of English takes a Japanese class in the US. The learning process may be different depending on the context. In the field of SLA, most researchers tend to use second language learning as an umbrella term covering all non-native language learning, a practice we will follow in this discussion as well. Behaviorism. As described in the previous discussion, early researchers attempted to apply behaviorist theories and research to understanding first language acquisition. Behaviorist theories were applied to second language learning as well, and the approach was widely influential in the 1950s and the 1960s. Behaviorists believed that second language learners, like children learning their native tongues or any other skill for that matter, acquired appropriate language behaviors or habits through repetition and reinforcement. For example, they believe that learners of English as a second language or ESL would learn the plural S form most effectively by producing it repeatedly in their own speech. As such, in classrooms, teachers often required learners to repeat linguistic forms in production drills. Example: 2 cats, 3 dogs, 4 mice, 5 cows, 7 pigs, and so on, without necessarily paying much attention to meaning. Though it has never been proven that any student died from this pattern practice, the exercise of repeating phrases ad infinitum become known as drill and kill. Behaviorists also claimed that errors produced by the second language learner, such as mistakes in word order, could be attributed to interference from the learner's first language. They argued that existing L1 knowledge or habits that differed from those of the L2 could interfere with second language development. For example, a native speaker of Japanese, a language that has no distinction between R and L sounds, would tend to have problems pronouncing R and L in English, leading, for example, to jokes about restaurants that serve flight lice with the meal. Differences between the learner's L1 and the L2 were thought to be the main source of difficulty for L2 learners, and the phonology and grammatical structures of languages were compared to predict areas of difficulty. This became formally known as the contrastive analysis hypothesis, or CAH. While a comparison of languages to predict grammatical errors has some common sense appeal and people can sometimes recall anecdotal evidence in favor of the idea, later research has shown that language differences do not reliably predict language learning difficulty. Studies have indicated that very few of the errors produced by L2 learners can be traced to their L1. Instead, many errors are due to developmental processes common to all learners regardless of L1 background. Just because grammatical structures in two languages are different, this does not necessarily mean that the second language learner will find them difficult. Interestingly though, one area where contrastive analysis continues to be used and useful is in predicting pronunciation problems. We can easily tell when a person's accent does not sound native-like, and many people can make a reasonable guess at the first language. For example, native Spanish speakers are sometimes known to add an extra vowel onto the beginning of words, with consonant clusters in English, such as in is school and is study, while native speakers of French might substitute a Z for a TH sound, as in this school. During the 1970s, much of the rationale behind behaviorist teaching methods was called into question following the impact of Noam Chomsky's ideas about generative grammar in the field of theoretical linguistics. At this time, there was a general move away from behaviorist theories and towards approaches that focused on the various learner internal mechanisms involved in language acquisition, a move that led to the emergence of new theories of second language acquisition, which will be discussed in the succeeding slides. Comprehensible input and the natural order hypothesis. Beginning in the 1970s, another view of L2 learning became popular. Rather than treating language as a series of mechanical habits that are learned through reinforcement, researchers began to view language learning as a more complex interaction of internal and external factors. One example of this approach can be found in the work of Stephen Krashen, who believed that L2 learners needed to be exposed to a special kind of input in order to learn the target language. Krashen recognized the importance to language learning of comprehensible input, that is, input in the target language that is understandable in a particular context of use but slightly more advanced than the learner's current level of ability. Comprehensible input is often abbreviated as I1, where I refers to the learner's current level and 1 denotes the slightly more advanced input. Through exposure to this input, L2 acquisition was believed to progress automatically and in the same fashion as L1 acquisition, but only if the learner's affective filter or emotional barrier was sufficiently low. In other words, if the learner was anxious or harbored negative emotions towards the target language, its speakers or the learning context comprehensible input could be filtered out. Krashen also argued that there is a natural order of acquisition. In other words, he claimed that all learners, regardless of their L1, progress through the same stages of second language development and in the same order. This natural order hypothesis was based on a series of studies known as the morpheme order studies. Together, Krashen's hypothesis and morpheme order studies suggested to teachers and researchers that if second language learners were simply exposed to the right kind of input and had the right attitude, the target language would emerge naturally in a particular predetermined order. Although Krashen's hypotheses were subject to criticisms on both theoretical and methodical grounds, his model was influential. One basic problem addressed by researchers, for example, was the difficulty of spelling out the current level, or I, and corresponding level of comprehensible input, I1, for a particular learner. However, subsequent work building on Krashen's model was able to locate learners' levels more specifically with respect to certain grammatical forms in clear-cut, empirically verifiable developmental sequences. Researchers also recognized the value to L2 learners of receiving feedback on problematic utterances and having their attention drawn to linguistic form. Such processes play central roles in the interaction hypothesis, and it is to this idea that we turn next. The interaction hypothesis. The interaction hypothesis, stemming from the work of Michael Long and Susan Gass, suggests that second language development can be facilitated when learners attempt to communicate with other speakers in the L2, experience difficulties, and engage in further interaction with their interlocutors to resolve their problems. As part of this process, learners often need to seek help in order to comprehend the input they received. Example, by using clarification requests such as, "Could you say that again?" For instance, in example 1 below, the learner, the non-native speaker or NNS, fails to understand the native speaker's or NS utterance. By using a clarification request, she is able to obtain input that is more comprehensible and perhaps better suited to her language learning needs. During interaction, learners also need to produce output that is comprehensible to others. In example 2, the NNS produces an utterance that is incomprehensible to her partner. In this case, she must draw upon her linguistic knowledge of English phonology or syntax, for example, to make herself understood. This process is known as producing modified output. Through processes such as obtaining comprehensible input and producing modified output, interaction is believed to help draw learners' attention to problematic differences between their interlanguage, example, their current knowledge of the target language, and the native form of the target language. When learners receive feedback on their L2 production, example through clarification requests, their attention can be drawn to gaps, that is, to areas in their linguistic knowledge which are need of improvement. For instance, in example 3, the student makes an error in subject-verb agreement, and the teacher provides corrective feedback in the form of a recast in her subsequent utterance. A recast is a more target-like way of expressing what is perceived to be a learner's intended meaning, changing the form but not the content of the utterance. In summary, then, interactionists claim that interaction provides opportunities for learning, although interaction is not the only force driving learning. Related to this is the question of whether interaction itself is learning, which is the claim made by socio-culturalists to be discussed next. Researchers working within the interactionist framework are currently carrying out qualitative, quantitative, and descriptive research on interaction-driven L2 learning. And that ends this video on the first part of second language learning. Please do not forget to like and subscribe on this channel.